Hello, you're watching World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Sarah Ashton-Cirillo, and now we're going to discuss Ukraine. Donald Trump, who vowed to cut a quick deal to end the war in Ukraine, takes office at the end of January. Kyiv and its European allies fear he could potentially cut support for Ukraine's military and force Ukraine to make concessions to Russia. However, it is not just Ukraine's sovereignty and independence that are on the line, but Europe's own long-term security interests as well. To discuss possible scenarios as well as where do we stand today after nearly 3 years of the war, I am joined by Sergeant Ashton-Cirillo, Ukraine Defense Forces. Hello, sir. Delighted to have you with us.
It's great to be here today, and to everybody in Poland around the world, it marks an amazing day. 2,000 plus years ago, Jesus Christ was born, brought into this world, and as we are in a time of such darkness, I think we have to take a moment to say everything is possible because of what happened more than 2,000 years ago. So Merry Christmas to everyone in Poland, in Ukraine, and around the world.
So let's start on a positive note, because we're also nearing the end of the year. So according to you, what was the biggest success for Ukraine this past year?
I think we have to look at the fact that we in the defense forces, on behalf of the Ukrainian people, were able to absolutely withstand this terrible attempts by Russia to really break through when the weapon supplies from our allies and partners were held up for a variety of reasons. As the world had watched 1 year ago in Washington, D.C., the supplemental bill for the Ukrainian people in order to carry out victory against the Russian enemy was stalled in Congress. When that passed in April and we were still in the fight, it showed the world just what the Ukrainian Defense Forces and the Ukrainian people are capable of. And I think that's what we have to look back on in 2024. The world was already counting us out, and we're still here, and we're still carrying out the efforts at victory that are necessary, not just on behalf of the Ukrainian people, but on behalf of the entire world.
Right. And are you worried about what could happen starting in January?
If you're referring to the new administration that's coming in, I am not worried. And one of the reasons for that is Donald Trump understands what it takes to succeed in every aspect of his career. This was a guy who managed to send a very strong message to the Iranian terrorists. President Trump has also shown that he is masterful when it comes to keeping America's enemies on guard and making sure that they don't know what's coming next. And so for anyone to think that President Trump is going to hand over American interests to any of our enemies and the common enemies of the United States, Ukraine, and the free world, including Poland, they're woefully mistaken. I look forward to January 20th. Because the weakness of the Biden administration had shown itself during the last almost 3 years of full-scale invasion. And one thing we know about President Trump is he is not weak.
But he's also unpredictable. So I guess you never know here. But I wanted to ask you about security guarantees for Ukraine. So what does Ukraine need? Of course, we know that some things could be out of region here. I'm talking about, a full membership in NATO, right? But perhaps some other security guarantees. What would Ukraine want?
Let's defer to what the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, President Volodymyr Zelensky, was talking about. He stated, we need this NATO guarantee. That said, we are clearly understanding that the different partners have different ideas. So ultimately, what I think needs to happen is that whatever package is put forth in this idea of the future, it has to come with ironclad ratification within the different houses of legislation, whether it's in Parliament in the United Kingdom, whether it's in the US Senate. We can't have just memorandums on paper. We need to have something that is the law of the land, especially if it doesn't involve a full membership in NATO.
Right, and you already said that Ukraine has been in crisis. I mean, that this year was difficult, right, for Ukraine, and now we're more than 1,000 days into the war. And Russia continues to make territorial gains, right, on the battlefield. So what is currently happening, and do you think that Ukraine will be able to perform better, moving perhaps into spring, if, of course, the war lasts that long?
Sure. So we have to be as members of the defense forces, we have to be prepared to continue fighting until the moment that our commanders have said something has been signed. And what we know is that despite what is being talked about in mass media and these supposed Russian advances, we have some of the strongest tactical and strategic commanders in the armed forces of Ukraine that are really the envy of the world. And as President Trump's team comes in and they get briefed fully as to the strategic ideas of what's happening along the entire front, a front that reaches from the Russian Federation inside of Kursk all the way down to, let's be real, Ukraine's Crimea, this extended front, people want clicks. So they go ahead and sell doom. The fact is, we are engaged in a variety of actions across the entire front that has caused mass casualties to the Russian Federation's army and inflicted horrific consequences on the economy of the Russian Federation. So for those suggesting that Ukraine is in a weaker position, they are fundamentally incorrect. However, we're facing an enemy that simply has more men, more weapons, and yet we're still standing strong and we're still free.
This is definitely admirable, but let's stop for a moment on this and concentrate on this Kursk offensive. How do you view this? Would you say that it was a success, or just yeah?
Sure. At the middle of the summer, somebody would have said to you 6 months ago, the Ukrainian Defense Forces were going to be occupying Russian Federation territory at the end of 2024. People would have looked, laughed, and said, what are you thinking about? And yet that's where we are. So without getting into operational security issues, the fact that we still are occupying the lands of the enemy and they have been unable to displace us clearly shows that the Kursk operation was a victory and continues to be a victory and continues to have been a strategic and bold and genius move by Ukraine's leadership.
And what other military targets are on Ukraine's agenda? What sort of areas would the military like to establish its presence in?
I think, again, we have to be careful about discussing specific operational goals, but it's very clear that we've taken the war back to Russia, and we've done so through weapon systems that have been produced here in Ukraine. We've done so through partisan networks that are carrying out the actions of the Ukrainian people inside of the Russian Federation. And so as the news comes out and people say, wow, this was an amazing operation, or who knew that this weapon was coming out, I think that's how we measure where we're looking and what we're trying and attempting to do. And what we're attempting to do is to make sure Russia understands that the Ukrainian people are not giving up, and that they can never sleep, they can never rest until the moment comes that they are the ones asking for this ceasefire, that they are the ones retreating because the damage to the Russian Federation, both in the occupied territories and inside of Russia, has become unsustainable for Putin's criminal cabal.
Right, and we've discussed the US, but what about Europe's support for Ukraine? What would Ukraine expect? I mean, what about, the frozen Russian assets? There is some division, right, among European leaders on that.
Sure, because every European country has to look at the legal standing. So while we can use generalized terms such as the G7, or we can talk about our partners, the reality is, just like Ukraine demands full sovereignty and territorial integrity, that the partner nations are also entitled to carry out what's of the best interest for them. That said, the Polish people, the governments of the Baltic states, of the border states, we're seeing that they're not giving in to the Russian terrorism. We see that they're not being fooled. We see our partners in Finland. We see our partners in Lithuania, in Latvia, Estonia, of course, Poland, standing resolute. And then when we hear the talks coming out from Brussels, when we hear the media reports coming out from France, that they're willing to put potentially their own folks here in Ukraine, I mean, that's a heck of a security guarantee. And it's also an amazing vote of confidence in the vision of a free and liberated Ukraine. And that's why I'm so grateful for our European allies. A lot of people want to say, hey, Europe's not doing enough. And yes, the politicians can discuss NATO spending and things of that sort. But on the ground, we are grateful every day for the people of Europe and the individual countries.
Right, of course. And going back to what is happening on the ground, let me ask you about North Koreans, because there are reports that they're actually detrimental to the Russian army, as there's no coordination and so on and so forth. So what is your take on that?
We've watched this, and I've spoken on your shows on TVP World about this before. You know, we knew in 2023 that the Russians were already bringing in North Korean laborers. And then we knew in late 23, actually this month, the first North Korean missiles 1 year ago were fired into Kyiv. And then we tracked the the North Korean ammo through Russia and being utilized. This is just another extension. But I don't think we can be surprised, to use the word you just did, that the North Koreans are detrimental to Russia's operations. You take these people who are basically Ottomans of the Kim Jong-un regime, get dropped in to the real world, and then be expected to carry out battles against the second strongest military in the world. The Ukrainian army is the second strongest army in the world. What did they expect was going to happen, especially when the Russian Federation treats these North Koreans as their own serfs? They are treating them very much like slave labor, only with weapons. This was the expected outcome. PR aside, simply put, North Korea can talk, rattle, and shake their sabers. But when it comes to carrying out battle, they are no match for the Ukrainian defense forces, just like the Russians have found out.
Absolutely. And since, we're, like I said, the year is coming to an end, for 2025, what would be on Ukraine's wish list? What are some of the goals that the country is planning to achieve next year? I would hope.
Well, we have to understand that almost 3+ years into the full-scale war, that the Ukrainian people want to be able to have the dual pillars of a victory that ensures and guarantees complete sovereignty of Ukraine in the hands of the Ukrainian people, while also being able to look to the future. So I think we can pay attention to the fact that there's investment starting to come back into the country. There's logistical channels opening up when it comes to certain train routes that are now heading into the European Union, not just into Poland anymore. And there's talks of potentially opening up airports in the west of Ukraine. And so with this, I think we're able to go ahead and understand that we're looking towards winning the future, while at the same time competing every day to make certain that the Russians understand that Ukraine belongs to the Ukrainian people. And the sooner they learn that lesson, the sooner we can all move forward to a brighter future.
Absolutely. And according to the slogan, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. So that's for sure will be the case, hopefully. Ashton-Cirillo, thank you, sir, for being with us this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you to the people of Poland. Slava Ukraini.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.